Okay, well, those who know me know that I have spent an exceptional amount of time in the desert, completely in solitude without the comforts of food and shelter. I've spent nights exposed to a brilliantly clear sky and days scorching with heat. We have been very uncomfortable and have had some very close encounters with dangerous animals. In some native cultures, this is called a vision quest. It's similar to the Australian Aborigine walkabout. To many, this is a form of self-sacrifice and discipline. People shake their heads at it, wondering why one would do that to themselves. And I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why I've done it in my life multiple times. The first is a test of self-discipline. Can I do it? Do I have the discipline, the dedication, the self-control to tell myself that I am going out into the desert for X amount of days and I will not leave before my chosen date of departure? This is something a lot of people can't do in today's world. A lot of people want to, or they say they can, but doing it is a whole different level. And I do it specifically because I want to know if I can do it. Because we tend to believe things simply for the sake of believing them without actually putting it into action and knowing that we can, that it's something that is worthy to believe. The second reason I do it, and this is probably the more important reason, is self-analysis. I want to know myself. I want to know if what I believe and how I view things is plausible, if it's rational, if it's sustainable. Very often we believe something blindly, and blind belief turns us into fanatics, it turns us into hypocrites. When we never consider to question our own narrative, we start becoming the things that we despise. In general, we don't want to challenge what we believe because we're scared we might realize there are flaws in the things that we believe, and that's very scary for a lot of people. For most, this could crumble their world. So people don't want to self-analyze, they rather want to stick to their own narrative and believe it and argue people over it. So that's the second reason I do it. I don't want to be one of those people. I want to consider my thoughts, I want to consider my perspectives. Why do I think the way I think? Why do I do the things that I do? Why do I believe the things I believe? And the best way to find this out is not having defensive arguments with other people. It's not reading books. It's to be alone. Completely alone. In fact, you have to be so alone that knowing that when you die, no one is going to know where to look for you or what happened to you. This is aloneness. This is when you are completely alone. This complete aloneness is what I believe to be the final judgment of the individual. And most people are shocked at its appearance when they lie on their deathbed. This is a sad reality. A lot of people have this final judgment when they're about to die, when they're on their deathbed, and by then it's too late to reanalyze. My question to that is, why wait for that moment? Why are you waiting for the moment to reanalyze yourself, reevaluate yourself, to be reborn again when it's already too late? You can become a new person. I had a teacher who once said to me, "It is very good to die often." And I find it very true, and I love the person that I've grown into. And people that do this exercise, I see changes in them as well. Now, I'm never going to share all my experiences in its entirety. I'm going to share many revelations I had in the days I sat in that desert. But some things are just mine and kept to the individual. So in this talk, I want to talk about the multiverse. Now, the concept of dimensions and realms have been around for centuries. Although I had experiences in these realms, it was on one such desert visit that I had a very particular particular encounter that helped me understand what the multiverses actually are. And I'm going to try and explain it best to my ability. Again, I speak from my experiences. This is not from a book, or it's not influenced from another source. If you want to read the whole experience of this particular quest, you are welcome to check the website in the descriptions to see my book. But let's go into the multiverses as I have understood it. So, God created the universe in 7 realms, or in 7 dimensions. Yes, there are 7 arch dimensions, just as there are 7 archangels. And the number 7 is very holy in so many cultures of the world. These arch realms are separated by levels of awareness, by the individual's level of awareness. That is how they are separated. Within these 7 arch dimensions, there are an infinite amount of sub-dimensions, which are separated by choices and decisions and perceptions. So the arch realms are divided by awareness. The sub-realms within those are separated by choices, decisions, and perceptions. Now I'm going to try and explain this. It's always one thing to see it and understand it on the moment as it's presented, but it's a whole new topic when I need to explain it to other people. So let's try. The first dimension of the multiverse are the base elements, the things that only have knowledge of existence, such as rocks, sand, water, stones, air, fire. These things do not exhibit the natural traces of living, such as eating, sleeping, and reproducing, as these elements exist and only react to what is being done to or around them. There is no underlying consciousness, so to speak, as there is in plants, animals, and people, although they can reflect intelligence as a response to outer sources. I'm going to go into that a bit later again, but the dimension 1 is the elemental world, which is the foundation of all. Dimension 2 is the growing things, plants, trees, shrubs. This realm is limited to those things we perceive as living. However, they have 2 levels of awareness, that of themselves and that of their surrounding environment. A plant will open its leaves in the morning, it will know to follow the sun. They respond to words, they respond to feelings and music, which affect their growth, which affects their health. Although there is a consciousness, it cannot again be related to animals and people. However, there is a sense of consciousness because there is awareness of life. There is a response to life. The third dimension is the dimension of perception. And yes, we are in the third dimension, as are animals, birds, most insects, and fish. We in this realm, we perceive not only our body and react to our surroundings, but we also have different ways of perceiving the world around us, making choices based on perceptions. This makes us very unique beings. However, we are not top of the pyramid. I'm sorry to say that. A lot of people get upset about that, because those very perceptions, when we get locked in our narrative, keeps us bound to the third dimension. Note that these dimensions are not a competition. Every realm has its function of sustaining the other one in some form or another. I do hope to get into that in a bit. The fourth dimension, there's a lot of talk about the fourth dimension. This is the consciousness elevated from our perspective narrative. This is when we can see the world for what it really is and not by our moral terms. In the third dimension, everything is separated and conditioned. We like certain things, we dislike other things. We enjoy some things, we don't enjoy other things. This is how we make the world. This is how the third dimension is formed, through our own perceptions. However, if we are able to break away from this world of duality, which we have created in our own head, we see the world for what it truly is. where a drought is no different to a rain. A brightly pink painted room is no uglier than a white or a grey one. When we reach this state, we are in the fourth dimension. If you can see the world without your own perceptions, your own morals, you see the world as it purely is. This is also what can be called enlightenment, awakening, ascension. It is to be, as Jeshua put it, I am. The duality disappears in the world. You do not separate things anymore by what you like, what you don't like, what you believe, what you don't believe. All that conditioning disappears and everything just is without moral set of judgments, values, or taste. This is also the realm where a lot of the little people of many cultures reside. And when you can break into this form of thought and see the non-dual world, seeing these other so-called mythical beings is not uncommon. If you look at a lot of the mystery missing cases, I'm very convinced that some are definitely interactions with the fourth realm, as they mostly involve small children. Small children have not yet developed a perception of the world as their parents have. They will often wander off with strange creatures that adults can't perceive, let alone understand how a 4-year-old can travel 12 miles in rugged terrain in less than 8 hours without being hurt, without being tired, without being hungry or thirsty. There are many cases like this, and I do believe that is an interaction with the fourth realm, especially that it's children. Because children don't have that duality of life yet. They haven't actually, so they see the world for what the world actually is. The fifth dimension. 2 things have occurred to understand this state of awareness. First, duality and perception have to dissolve. But at the same time, we must understand ourselves purely and completely. And this is very difficult to explain, as I have not first-handedly experienced this state. I have been shown it. Here, consciousness is an actual, tangible thing. It's something that is used and worked with. Transport vehicles here are fueled with consciousness, not AI, because it is not artificial. It is a pure consciousness. Consciousness in this realm is harnessed. It's a high potential. It's completely understood. It's a tool. And it's used much with the self as outside of the self. So the entire fifth dimension is actually built on consciousness, compared to the fourth dimension, which is the release of duality, the release of perception and taste and just seeing the world as it is. So I'm just going to recap that. Dimension 1 is that of the elemental world. Dimension 2 is that of the growing world. Dimension 3 is the world of perception. Dimension 4 is the world as it is, without perception, without duality. And the fifth is one of pure consciousness. Dimension 6 and 7 I'm not going to go into much because it is close to impossible to actually explain it, because even words in those places are very limited. It's a very beautiful place. 7th especially is, the glimpse that I caught of it was extremely bright, which again I think it was just a perception of mine. It's not bright at all if you understand what you're seeing. So 6 and 7, is something quite extraordinary, again based on awareness, based on consciousness, which I'm not going to try and explain. I don't want to mislead or have people misunderstand, because I myself am not sure how to put that into words. It's more feeling, it's more the experience of it. So I want to focus more on especially the fourth, because a lot of people today are talking about, oh, we're moving into the fourth dimension. That's not how it works. Moving into a fourth dimension is a very individual, personal thing, because it's got to do with your perceptions. It's got to do with your ability to view the world, to view yourself, to understand yourself, to understand who you actually are, not by what you believe, not by where you grew up, what parents you had. It's all about who you are naturally, by nature. And that's very difficult for people to comprehend. And if you want to understand yourself in this way, time alone is the key. Because the moment you are, if you're around people, if you're around objects, you're always going to have a sense of duality. You're always going to think of the things you like, of the things you don't like. You're always going to feel bored. You're always going to feel excited. You're always going to find something to do. This is not analyzing yourself. This is looking for distractions outside of yourself. So let me go into a bit the fourth realm now. The fourth realm, as I mentioned, is also the place where a lot of the little people are found in most cultures. I've had multiple experiences with small people, whether it's elves or gnomes or whatever you want to call it. It's a beautiful experience. If you ever have experienced something like that, you have definitely shifted something in your awareness. And interestingly enough, this is something I'm going to explain, and it's very curious how many people have actually had this experience due to certain circumstances. So now in my work, in my channeling work that I do, how it's explained is there is something called the tween times. Now tween times are exactly what it sounds like, which is between times. Things that are between two worlds. So if you take dusk and dawn, those are tween times because it is not fully day, it is not fully night. It is a tween time. The bank of a river is a tween place because it is not yet the river, but it's not mainland. The base of a tree, it is not the tree, but it's also not the ground yet. These are tween times, and it is a very important thing if you want to understand what the fourth dimension is, if you want to tap into that. Because in the tween times, that is what is called overlaps. Now, everywhere you get overlaps, you get natural overlaps where the multiverses just cross over. And sometimes other things move into those spaces where you are able to see them. A lot of UFOs that people see are in fact not even UFOs, they're terrestrial, they're from the earth, they're just from a different multiverse. So if you've seen little people, if you've seen lights moving around, things that you can't explain, the chances that you saw it at a tween place or a tween time is very, very likely. Most people see this at dusk or dawn. You see these things, bank of a river, base of a tree. This is where you see these things because these are the tween times. If you look at Jeshua, if you see the Christ, after the crucifixion, he showed up to his followers in tween times. It was always dusk or dawn that he showed up to his followers. This is just where there's an overlap of the multiverse. And I remember I was explaining this to my mother many years ago, and my mother was having trouble to understand the structure of the multiverse. And then she came to me one day very excited. She told me she was busy doing the dishes, and the dishwash soap, the bubbles had formed and they were all clinging to each other. And she suddenly realized that is the multiverse. It's all these little beliefs, these perceptions, these levels of awareness that are all clinging to each other. And there where the bubbles touch each other, those are the tween times. That is how you can interact with different multiverses. This is how you can touch into the different dimensions. And it's a beautiful thing. If you start going out a lot at dusk and dawn, especially alone, go out into nature, go out into the desert, go out into the wilderness, sit quietly, you are going to experience things. If you're not going to see things, you might hear things. This is the tween times. This is crossover points. Now, crossover points is also something to be of caution. There's a lot of stories of crossover. There's an old Celtic story of a prince who was given a magic horse who could fly him to distant kingdoms. And one day the prince commanded this horse to fly him to a distant kingdom where it was wonderful, big parties, and he said he wants to go home, and the horse said, "You can't go home." And he commanded the horse take him home, and the horse said, "Very well, I can take you home, but you're not allowed to get off my back. You have to stay on my back." And they went home, and when they got home, the man saw that his castle was in ruins, his whole family was dead, and he was so distraught that he jumped off the horse's back, and the moment he touched the ground, he crumbled to dust, meaning he aged thousands of years and he died. And that's the thing, you have to remember the multiverse, the different levels of awareness, the different multiverse. Time is different, because remember, time is also a perception. So time changes. So if you cross over into a multiverse, you can't say how long you're going to be gone. These children that go missing for 2 days and they're found again, they're not hungry, they're not tired, it's because to them they were gone for an hour. And it can play both ways, so you have to be very aware of that. There's also an old story that takes place in the Himalayas of a monk that was traveling, and he saw a cave that was full of people singing and dancing, and he was intrigued and he went in and he spoke to these people who lived in the mountain. And then when he came out of the mountain, he suddenly aged 100 years. So crossing over is not recommended. That is why just sitting still and watching, you have to be in a certain state of awareness to be able to cross over. I've crossed over twice in my life, but that was I was being guided. This was my time in the desert. This was through an experience that I had. To cross over, it's all got to do with the level of awareness. This thing of, we're crossing over into the fourth dimension. No, we're not. As an individual, you can, but you've got to know what you're doing, and you have to realize who you are. You have to be aware. You have to have a sense of understanding what duality is. You have to have a sense of understanding that you create the world around you through your likes, through your dislikes, through what you believe, what you don't believe, what you love, what you don't love, what you like, what you dislike. Everything in the third dimension is based on that, and that's why we're here. So if you want to see fourth dimension, you've got to clear out your head, and that is one way to do that is prayer, meditation, to just quiet your thoughts, to come to a point that you don't have these perceptions, that you have a full understanding of yourself and the world around you, that you see it for what it is, not through a perception of what you like and what you don't like. So I hope this gives you something that you can work with. At least this is just the introduction of my experience, what I understood of the realms, and it is possible to move between them as an individual. Christ demonstrated that, Buddha demonstrated that. It's all got to do with understanding yourself completely. Because understanding yourself completely is actually to understand the nature of God. And we're going to go into that, what is God, because there are so many religions out there, there are so many spiritual groups, there are so many definitions of God that it's somewhat overwhelming. And the way God is perceived is exactly the same issue, is that we perceive God in a certain way, through a certain scripture, through a certain belief, through a set of morals that we have been constructed through our parents, through religion, through society, through upbringing. So even God has become an individual perception. So to understand the nature of God is to understand what God is fully and completely, because within us is the seed of God. And if we can tap into that, that is when the multiverse begins to open doors for us, and we can start working in those places. If you have any questions, please put them down, and if I can answer them, I'll be honest to answer them. If I can't, I'll be very honest about that too.